Good morning and welcome to the CADclass podcast. I'm Josh,
I'm Jake.
and we're going to be experimenting with some new formats and thoughts and ideas as we did last week. But Jake, it's been an eventful few weeks, I'd say.
It has been. We are finally published. Finally. I know last week we said we clicked the button, and that technically wasn't true because we clicked publish in the AM the day afterwards. But we are finally published. So happy. Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
And then we published, and right away we found, actually I should say Joestry, shout out to Joestry, found that formatting error after all our read-throughs, and then we pressed the publish button. We're like, oh no.
Goes, hey, this looks terrible. This is wrong. This is wrong. Like,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for showing
you didn't do that. Yeah. So just a quick little announcement to the community for those of you listening. If you do spot an error, please do share it on the Discord. We're going to change those as quickly as possible in the beginning. And then as the year rolls on, we'll probably do monthly updates. So we'll try to batch those a little bit. But so far, so good, Jake. Some of the feedback coming in is quite good.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite good.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Updated pictures. Great. One of my favorite things about the new edition is, and we talked about this after the old edition, is those new photos at the top at the beginning of the projects just make you want to build the project. They do such a good job of being like, oh, this looks like fun. I want to do this. So nailed that with the help of AI.
Yeah, I am so pleased with it. I hope you guys have a ton of fun with it. Again, if you have gone through a good portion of the first edition and you're in a stage where you go, well, I already feel like I have some expertise with this. I already have some experience with this program, and I'm already so far into it. Why would I go back and do beginner chapter 1 things? I've said it once, and I will say it over and over and over again. I have been using this program for years, and I still go back on YouTube and watch Fundamentals 101 for beginners, basics, fusions, because I will learn a brand new tool damn near every single time. It's this very, very strange, I think it's more of a psychology thing, where as you get deeper and deeper into it, you have this, it's kind of a self-delusion that you go, well, yeah, I know everything. And it's like the very, very simple, basic beginner stuff that you've just had this kind of mental block on, or you've had to do workarounds for so many years. Like, minor things I will still pick up and I will still learn from this community. And we've actually included an ungodly amount of those inside of the new book. So especially in the simple beginner chapter 1, just to highlight one of them. And I don't know if I don't think I've told you this, Josh, but it's something that one of our community members, Ethan, taught me. And he said it so casually as if, oh yeah, everyone knows this. I'm like, I don't know this. If you have a polygon, anything like that, and you want to click all of the edges, you want to have all the edges highlighted, how would you do it?
I would double click it.
Okay, so you know this trick. I didn't.
I only recently found out, and Jake, you're gonna like this. You know how I found out?
Go on.
By watching a Fusion Fundamentals video.
There you go.
I was like, oh, look at this. Somebody, I can't remember who it was. Somebody on YouTube published a video, and it was just fundamentals, really simple stuff. And just like you, I always go back and rewatch the fundamentals. And he said double click, and I'm like, oh, hey, whoa. What did you just say? Whoa. I've had, like, here I am clicking.
I've been holding down control and clicking every single line for years.
Yeah.
For years. Yeah. And someone's like, yeah, just double click it.
Yep. So Fusion Fundamentals can confirm that I learn something new just about every time I either watch or read, and I will continue to do that from here forward.
Yeah, it is so shockingly good. Obviously,
and even it's even higher level stuff. It's not even just that. It's like a lot of times I also enjoy seeing how people think about and approach the software, and everybody has their own unique flavor. And not only that, but the things they say, the things they don't say, the things they assume, the things they don't assume. So, I mean, this is part of the reason that I'm when people ask us, why would I also take the online course when I have the book? Aren't they the same thing? And my response is always the same, is, well, even though the content is largely the same, because the presentation is different, it's a dramatically different experience,
Mm.
right? You're going to get something from reading a textbook or working through a book, and you're also going to get something from working through an online course. And when you put those two things together, they're completely different learning experiences and they're complementary,
In the
right?
same way that if you learn differently from a book to a YouTube video to watching someone in person. Like anytime we do in-person classes, obviously you have the added value of going, "Sir, how do you do that?"
Yeah.
But there is something different being able to see in real time someone going, "Okay, I'm gonna do this and this and this and this," and it just jives a little bit better. So it is still our fundamental belief that there is never one perfect way to learn a new program or a new CAD software. It is always essential to be having available all of these different avenues for people because we all learn in different ways. I love to learn CAD through a book, to be honest, any software. Anytime we open up a new portion of our business and go, oh, we're switching over editing softwares. The first thing I do is go to my library and buy and check out a book. The first thing that I do, and Josh goes, just watch a bunch of YouTube videos. And I'm like, it's completely different learning experience for me personally, and that obviously extends to CAD in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I actually do both as well. So I'll read a book, but I like the visual context that videos offer.
Mm,
And often when I open a book, I feel like there's something that I'm lacking about general workflows very early and often, especially in a new program, new software, teach myself to code. I can remember that, right? It's like I because I don't know what I don't know, I can kind of click and follow things, but I'm not quite sure. And I'll watch a video and I'll go, oh, okay, I think I have some additional context for this. So, yep, totally agree.
I I just want to tack onto this. The other thing that we've also done is reached out to professionals and hire them basically as tutors for us, which I think most people would go, that seems ungodly expensive. Uh, sometimes
Well,
not.
and it
When we,
depends, right? Right,
yeah,
expense is like we talk a lot about changing time for money. It's like, well, expensive is
yeah,
a funny way to put it. How much is our time worth? And what else could we be
yeah,
doing with it? And if it's gonna take us 10 hours to learn something that we could hire a tutor and learn in an hour, well, that's worth quite a bit of money.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
huge
yeah,
fan of tutors.
yeah.
And
We've
I think they're underutilized somehow. I think
mhm,
who, not how, is probably a better way to approach a lot of things. Who do I know that I can ask a question is often better than how do I
mhm.
do it?
I think it comes down to there's there's just like an old adage with plumbers where you go, oh, I hired somebody and he's $100 an hour, and he tried to fix a leaky pipe, and it took him 5 hours, and he really didn't do it. And so I hired another guy who's $700 an hour, and he came in, fixed it in 15 minutes. And you go, oh well, was that a really easy problem that the other guy didn't know? It's like, no, it's just that I've been doing it for 30 years. I've
Yeah.
got 30 years of experience behind me. That's why I can do it so quickly and so efficiently. That's why I'm worth it. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, completely. Um,
Good morning, by the way. Good morning,
oh yeah, that's right.
Connie and
Hello to
Ogre,
everyone.
PC Van Fleet. It is super good to be here with you and to see you post publication. We've gotten some good feedback. Connie said she bought the book. Johnny, you're a fan. Howdy, howdy. Yeah, so Connie brought the book. Her copy will arrive tomorrow. Connie, you might have what we're going to be considering the Founders Edition. You may have a couple of small errors in your copy, and you're going to be one of very few people that have that. So we're just going to go ahead and spin this and say, congratulations, you have a Founders copy
It
of
is the
VO.
Cybertruck of CADclass. The I
um,
I'm a big fan of that car. I love it. I recognize it has an obscene amount of faults in it, but that every single time you have a first generation of basically anything, the people that are paying a premium for it, they kind of know that it's going to be filled with all these mistakes and errors and bullshit they have to deal with. But yeah, it hasn't been around long enough in mass to fix. So you guys have the founders edition laden with a few formatting mistakes.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, we are fixing that as quick as possible.
We have already made a
And trying to
couple of
correct it.
updates to the manuscript,
Yeah.
and one of them is in review. We'll probably right after we get off here try to fix a couple other little
Mhm.
issues. But overall, really nice, really nice. So
We
Jake,
wanted to show off the I
yeah,
made a thing portion
yeah,
so far
yeah,
because
yeah.
you guys have already built some of the projects, which are fantastic. One person in specific, Jotrik, has just been killing it with the amount of progress that he's done. But as always, we'll start on the I made a thing with Ogre. I actually haven't read the description of this. This could be a billion things. Living in mid 1990s double wide mobile home. For the last 30 years, it settled so much that the doors will not stay fully open. Using this, so I built this using 6 10x5 magnets left over from a previous project. Bad, not bad. I love these simple things. I will say it's a
Oh,
blue
so he just
base.
bolts that in the door and then opens the door and it holds it open. Magnets. We were talking about magnets last week. How fun it is to
Pretty
work
rad.
with magnets and 3D printers.
That's pretty rad. I love
Putting it
that.
to work. Amazing.
And then a
Really cool
really,
solution.
really, really adorable project. Now that it's over, the results are in, I can finally share this super fun project. A friend of mine wanted a blue ring pop box for an engagement ring. Couldn't find it on Etsy, so I built it. That is so beautiful, so adorable. I love this.
I also
Um,
love this.
yeah, it is. I it's a bit of a corny phrase, but I do still love it. My fiance said, "Oh, I don't care about the ring that he gives me. He could give me a ring pop, and I would still say yes." And I think that's a lovely sentiment. And this is just so glorious. I don't know if this has nothing to do with CAD. This is just something that I want. It's like story time.
Story
Um,
time.
story time. When I proposed to my fiance, days before, I was practicing in the middle of the night how to do it because the first time I went down on my knee, nobody tells you this. You're really unstable. As soon as I went down, I fell over. I was so nervous. And then I proposed in the we went. I took it to Amsterdam, and we went to the nation's botanical garden, which is gorgeous. It's this gigantic 18th century glass dome, and it's kind of split in half, where one half is a forest and one half is a rainforest. And so you can literally look at this glass window, and it's covered in humidity and moisture. We were on the dry forest side, and she's holding my hand, and she's going, "God, love, you are really sweaty." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. Look at the walls. It's so humid in here." And she goes, "I think that's on the other side." And I go, "Oh," and I walk away.
That's adorable.
Oh, yeah. But making anything, I think this is the second engagement-y thing that I've seen on Discord, and I loved
What was
to
the
see
first
it.
one?
I think someone said their engagement ring that they proposed to was the Lord of the Rings ring
Oh, yeah, yeah,
that we
yeah, yeah.
made
Yes, that
very
was
early
their
on,
yes, 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 yes. You are
which is
yeah.
kind of lovely.
That's
Kind of nice.
adorable.
I know. I think we wanted to show off a little bit more. Connie and Ogre, they're both using HueForge.
Yes,
God, these look so
yes,
rad.
yes.
These look so flipping cool. Look, it's so, like, obviously it's heavily textured, but there's nothing about any of these that says 3D printing.
No,
Maybe if you look at the background, but on most of these, it's only until you get very, very close that you realize that it is 3D printed. It's ridiculous how good these look on both of them. It's just so rad.
and it just brings up so many. This is I continue to find this fascinating. Just how many different aspects of our lives are going to be impacted by this technology. Which, by
Mhm.
the way, how could you have predicted? This is a really difficult to predict idea.
Yeah.
Right. If you're thinking about 3D printing, you're like, I know what we should do. We should
We should make
3D
it
print
2D.
pictures. It's like, yeah, we should make a 3D printed picture. It's like, why? What would you get out of it? And then when we first saw these things in person, I was like, oh,
Wow. Wow.
oh, I see.
I
Right.
get it. Yeah.
So really, really cool.
Awesome. Awesome.
And
And then also
above,
we
well,
have.
hang on. Before you go,
Oh,
there's another one above, I believe. I think there's another one right there.
we saw
Yeah.
this last week, but this
Oh, is that the one we had on there last week?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow.
Look,
Wow.
playing
Wow.
around with it. It looks so
Gotcha.
good. It looks so rad. And then we do have some brand new rooms for the brand new projects. Things like the basics, where we purely just an AI UI, nothing too exciting. Some classic donuts where Joe Street has already made his first donut. Love to see it. A little bit of a cartoony cartoony fare. The Saturn V rocket, it has just become more accurate. Essentially, I went
Yeah.
through it, and I'm like, after building the full size thing, I was kind of looking at the Series One or Edition One Saturn V rocket. I'm like, oh, it doesn't. It's actually not accurate, which is so me. It doesn't need to be accurate, but I wanted it to be. So now it is significantly more close to the final product. So absolutely fantastic. But the giant rocket that I printed, I no longer have. It's currently up in Sacramento with Josh.
Yes,
So I
it's a
can't
better
hold
place.
it and show you how accurate it is, but it is.
It's so, so cool. It's really well done. And I know one of the pieces of feedback that we got about this project is we had the decals and we're like, hey, play around, see if you can figure out how to add decals. But it turns out that isn't actually not a very intuitive thing to do in Fusion.
No, I mean that's why
And
it's a
it
challenge. To be fair.
and so as we were talking and discussing the next revision of the book, we thought we really need to teach people how to do the decals if we're going to ask them to add some.
Mhm.
So we did go in much more detail and depth about those decals. And it's one of those things we talk a lot about this too, where you don't have to make it look accurate, but there's something really satisfying
Oh,
about, oh, even more photos. Well, that's unbelievable. There's something really satisfying about just making it look more like the thing actually looks, or
yeah.
making it, customizing it, making it look like what
Mhm.
it should or will look like in real life. And it's,
It is
yeah,
a huge part of especially product development where you are working on a product for a client and they go, "Yeah, that looks about right," and they're not jazzed, even though you put in a huge amount of effort into it. And as soon as you add in uh, a little bit more accurate appearances to it, a background, some props that go along with it, put it in the rendering workspace, or especially putting their logo as a decal on the product, especially on a curved surface, they get so jazzed immediately. It elevates it. And as people that go through our class, when they go, yeah, I don't really need rendering, I don't really need appearances, as soon as they apply it to their own projects, they go, "Oh my god, it looks so much better, so in no time, essentially, with no more effort." Really quick, I wanted to show off Dairies, dude. Is everyone on the Hue Forge train except for me? This looks so flipping cool.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes is the answer. And yeah, look, this is insane. This is so cool.
I
And just
love
the
this one.
ability to do it because you can AI generate images so quickly, and then you can bring it into the software and start to play around with it. And with the Bamboo A1 Mini and the filament management system, it is so easy. It's really not hard at
So
all.
awesome. How is that
This
3D
is,
printed?
I
It's
don't even
so
know. It's amazing.
so fucking cool.
It's amazing.
All right.
Yeah.
And then we also had a finger surfboard that nobody's made yet. I think I have it. Um, this surfboard, I was playing around with this, driving down PCH, which is the big highway that goes along the beach in Southern California. This thing is so much fun to play around with. I highly recommend people make this. I know they'll go, it's chapter one. I already know everything. That's fine. That's not the purpose of this. Print this out and ride it outside. Passenger, don't do this while you're driving. It is so unbelievably fun. I was giggling like a boy when I was playing with this. Um, if you can get some sandpaper or some grip tape or anything, or some anti-slip tape that I think a lot of people have just lying around the house, and just make a little grip on this. It helps out a ton. And we've actually uploaded a little PDF of a templates that you can use one to one. You can print it out, and it's the exact same or the exact size of the grip tape that you need. Um, Dude, this was so much fun. I know I'm like tooting my own horn. Of course, I like it, but yeah, I cannot recommend enough. This was so much fun.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Um, and then we also have the 10 Circuitry Tower that Joshi printed in absolutely no time at all. And it looks rad. I love these things. And he goes, yeah, it holds up weight. It holds up an entire TI calculator, which weighs 1,000,000 pounds.
Yeah, I was just saying that's pretty impressive. It's pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah.
And
Um,
these things still really blow my mind. You look at it and
yeah,
you're like, what, how does this work? Why?
it is just so rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it so much. And then I don't think has anyone made the carab? Yes. Oh, Joseph, of course, Joseph has. Yeah, made the carabiner, which is rad. But then nobody has done the prototype drone yet. This is still a blank workspace, but we will hopefully see that being filled up pretty
Yeah.
soon, which we like to see.
I just can't wait to see the first person who prints it out and then orders the components and assembles it and makes it.
I know. That's
I
gonna be
mean, I
insane.
also am excited to see the CAD models for it. And Jake, we leaned into something, kind of want to double click on that for just a second. We leaned into an idea that I felt we missed in the first version of the book, and we tried to hit a little bit more in this version, which is we didn't show people enough how to pull off the shelf components into a
Mhm.
model so that you don't have to model everything from scratch, right? Just grab the parts online from a repository, from a database, from another CAD software, and you can bring them in and you can actually start to build really complex models by, in the drone project, make a simple frame that connects all the components together and then just finding out where the holes and locations are to bolt them down. So
Mhm.
that was like, to me, that was one of the best things. Not only is the drone super interesting to build and fun to think about and not so hard to design, but it gives us the opportunity to bring in all those external components.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's usually not the easiest thing in the world. There is, for some reason, quite a lot of large websites that are kind of touted as being, oh, it's where all the engineers go to kind of find components and motors that they don't want to have to build themselves. It's still weirdly hard to scavenge to find all these components. It's not as like indexable in a repository as you'd imagine. It's very, very strange. Like I obviously every single bolt and nut you can ever imagine is pretty easily accessible, duh. But some simple things like some basic electronics components, you'd go, well, yeah, it should be easy to try and find like a very simple model of like an Arduino Nano or an Arduino Edition One or an Arduino Uno, the fifth version, or just random stuff here and there, and then bizarrely not easy to find. It's kind of strange. Um, but yeah, hopefully this makes life a little bit easier. And also working with step files, so nice.
It's
For anyone
so
who's
nice.
worked on STL files trying to edit them, working on a step file is like, oh, it's everything I've ever wanted. It's great. Oh my god, I can extrude something on it. I can delete things. It's like, yeah, you can. It's awesome. Um, but yeah, uh, this for this week for this format, I want to switch gears a little bit.
Yep.
Last week we played a really fun little game called X with Y, where the idea is that if you have something in the world of making or 3D printing, CNCing, CAD for us, that is an almost perfect thing. If it just had this one extra thing, it would be so rad. It would be so cool. Just it can be as simple or it can be as complex as you like. This is always a really fun game to play for me. Um, and one of the topics that we talked about last week was 3D printing homes and how for like 5 years it was just touted as this like, oh, it's amazing. All houses are going to be 3D printed. It's like, not really. Not really. They're really groovy artistically and they're fascinating from an architecture perspective, but the actual real life application of it, it's not there for homes. It's a little hard to see. And my counter argument is uh, these 3D printing homes is probably not the way to go, but a 3D printed igloo is actually a really interesting application where if you're in the middle of nowhere, in a place where people get lost and it's now a survival situation, having essentially a safe house that you can go to that you can shelter in that's in the middle of nowhere where it is completely inefficient to bring a construction crew and timber and everything that kind of needs to go into it. Where oh yeah, you can just have like one guy in a go anywhere van with a 3D printed structure that you can just kind of make and then zoot on to the next location. It makes a little bit more sense, and it kind of jogged my memory. And I don't think we've talked about it on here, but one of my when I was in my senior year of university, my professor has a patent on 3D printing structures on interstellar bodies. Yeah. So he has, I believe, the only patent on it. And he's done all the engineering on it. It just hasn't been created yet. Where he essentially developed a system where you could use a lens to use solar energy to melt lunar dust into bricks essentially to make structures. So it's how you take a dusty moon essentially and use it to create, without using any water, which obviously wouldn't really work, to make a solid structure. Obviously, it wouldn't be airtight, but you could. But it's like, okay, I can see literally some bricks kind of being set up. I kind of like that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's kind of groovy. I can see that in the future as being a thing. I can picture that. And so I've always kind of been fascinated about what is the future of 3D printing, not in a what's the next cool thing there's going to be, but actually where is the next big thing's going to be in 10 years, 20 years, so on and so forth. And so I went on to ChatGPT and I just said, what are 10 likely advancements in 3D printing that you foresee in the future? And some of them are really interesting, and I can completely see this happening in the very short term future. And some of them I go, nah, no way. This is either not feasible or basically I can't think of any application. But that doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means I'm not very creative right now. So I wanted to bounce. So I have eight of the ones that I actually found interesting that I want to bounce off Josh. He hasn't heard them yet, and I want to hear Josh's immediate reaction. And I also want to hear your guys' reaction as well on the comments. So these are all things that do not exist, or they partially exist now. That's what I kind of seen as a recursive theme. That kind of exists right now, not in a perfected sense. And this is kind of imagining, oh, when it is perfected in the future, wouldn't it be great? So this is what I want to talk about. So the first one is multi-material 3D printing. And you go,
Exists.
well, we kind of already have that, and
We have it.
one of their comments is a 3D printer that can combine plastic parts, metal parts, and ceramic parts inside one print.
So yeah, the closest we have to that right now, I guess to your point, is um, the Prusa XL with tool changer,
Mhm.
where
Where we
you
have
have
multiple materials, multiple
multiple, and
plastic materials.
well, I mean, multiple anything that can be extruded materials is what I would say. Anything that you can pump out of an extruder. I guess where it gets a little bit interesting about what you're saying is, so ceramic is still extruded in that same way, but metal is usually centered,
Mhm.
right? So I guess the question will become, are there going to be printers that combine FDM with something like resin
Mm.
in one go? Could you build up an FDM structure, add resin inside of it, cure the
That
resin?
sounds kinda rad, actually.
So I think the multi-material with extrusion is already there, and you can also, as you know, you can have extruders with metal infused filaments. And I
Mhm.
actually, even as you say that, I'm not really sure I fully understand what the limits of extruded 3D printing are. I'm not even sure I know all of the different ways that those
I don't think anyone
extrusions can
knows,
be
really.
used. So multi-material printing is definitely already here, but I haven't seen it combining technologies that are still 3D printed, but opposite in scope. That's my immediate reaction.
That's your
What do you
hot
think?
take. Yeah, I agree. I everything in making it always as technology always starts off on an industrial level, just coming out of like an R&D factory, and then it essentially gets miniaturized and commercialized so it can be sold to hobbyists or makers essentially. And this happened with literally every single technology under the sun. You could literally buy a desktop particle accelerator if you want. And but the idea with metal 3D printers, I don't think will ever be incorporated on like a consumer level because there's a chance of explosions with powderized metal. So you need all of these extra safety precautions that really only work in industrial levels. So maybe we'll see it on industrial levels. I don't know, but on the consumer level, probably not. Probably
Yeah.
not. But who knows? If this list is kind of with a mindset of 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future, who knows? Who knows? I'm ready for the new engineers to come through the door and just like shake it up again. You know?
Definitely,
Um,
definitely.
the next one is advancements in bioprinting. So one of the things that I think we all saw in headlines like 5, 10 years ago is, oh, somebody 3D printed an ear. It's like, yes, comma. And if you dig in a little bit deeper, it's been in the trials for close to a decade now. I don't know if there's anyone that's talking around with 3D printed ear, but I think the idea is that you
But they
use
are
3D.
walking around with 3D printed valves. I'll tell you that for
Oh
sure.
yeah, definitely.
So
And
they
3D
so
printed skull
well, but I'm saying like internal
replacements. No,
valve. So it sounds like I actually know a little bit of something about this because
I hope you would.
the guy that I stayed with when I went to San Francisco worked in this area at Stanford.
Mm,
And he worked in one of the world's prominent labs doing this kind of stuff. And I got a chance to ask him a lot of questions about bioprinting because I was confused. So you're
right.
like, obviously when you're thinking about an ear, there's the there's the structure of the ear, the physical structure of the ear, and then there's the ear cells themselves. And so it
Mhm,
sounds like what a lot of the experimentation, and this is very surface level only from the discussion I've had with him, but they're building structures that then they implant cells on the outside of to grow around.
oh, so the
So they
structure isn't
Not
biological matter?
necessarily not necessarily biological matter. I think it can be. I think
Interesting.
there are some instances where there is kind of biological structure throughout, but they're still using a 3D printer, by the way, to put the cells on
Mm,
the outer structure in a lot of cases. But they're doing it after this thing is built. So, for example, if you've got a heart valve and let's say you need a catheter that's a weird shape, right? Whereas traditional manufacturing might just make a catheter and they're all the same or they'll look
mm,
right. But with 3D printing, you can customize the shape of that catheter and then you can add body cells on the outside of it, reducing the likelihood that it rejects or, you know, on and
mhm,
on. Again, I'm talking at a very surface level. And if anybody listens to this pod and has experience with this kind of stuff, I would love to know the
mm.
actual state of the art. But I actually think there's probably if we were to start digging in, we could probably find 5 or 10 examples for next week of things that would actually blow our minds
Oh, I
that
bet.
people are already doing it for. So that's my hot take here is that it's already happening quite frequently. We just the I think a lot of the problem is the way that we conceptualize what we mean when we say 3D printing these things. We're thinking about FDM printers just being able to do like a lot of the general public think about them just being able to do everything in one go. Can you 3D print a heart? It's like, well, kind of. You can 3D print structures and you can put heart cells around it and you can make it function somewhat like a heart. But maybe this is
Is it still
philosophical
a
too.
heart?
Yeah. So maybe that's the
Yeah.
question. When is a heart a heart? What is the essence of a heart? What is the essence of
How
skin?
is
What
that
is the
different
essence
from
of an
people
ear?
that have heart failure and they're being plugged into these huge machines that are able to recirculate blood and reoxygenate blood? Is that a heart? Kinda. It's purely mechanical, but
You're
yeah.
right. So is it the function that makes the heart a heart? Is it yeah. So
I think
tough
it's the
question.
love.
Oh.
I think it's one thing that I'm really interested about in the bioprinting side is dealing with, and this is a slightly morbid term, but expiry dates. Like, I think what not a lot of people realize is when they go and donate blood, after I think it's something like 3 months, that blood is expired. It cannot be used. It needs to be thrown away. It's either going to be used or thrown away. Like during natural disasters, when communities come together and they donate huge amount of blood, it's like that's amazing. But some of these people, but all of that blood, if they have a surplus, it will be thrown away as biohazard in the next few months, and that's why all of these Red Cross societies, they're always like, oh, you want to be consistently donating blood because we always need it, not just during natural disasters. It's like this is a constantly needing thing, and I think the idea with having a an ear or a nose or heart or an organ or anything like that, obviously, it needs to be refrigerated because the cells will start to die. But with 3D printing, it's like, well, if you're on a space journey to Mars and it takes years to get there, you know, the blood will have been expired. We need to create synthetic blood, but also organs, they won't last more than a week in refrigeration. You need to be able to print that on demand and then have it work. So I think that's obviously very deep future, but that's where it really, really gets exciting.
100% agree.
Long missions.
We do have a question in the chat.
Oh.
So the lovely Miss Connie says, CADclass, is there a possibility in Fusion to create an asymmetric fillet?
Ooh.
I saw it in SolidWorks in a SolidWorks video, but cannot find something comparable in Fusion.
Asymmetric fillets. Oh, so I think Connie's referring to there's two ways to answer this. You can set up fillets that along the length of an edge, it changes radius, where it starts really small and then it gets larger to one end. That is absolutely a feature. If you go into the fillet tool, you can set up multiple depth or multiple radii depths. But as far as one side being more slanted than the other, I don't think that's available because it's not very common.
I guess there might be another approach where you could add points.
Yeah, you could
and then
you could
break your
sweep
line
cut
up into.
that profile
You could sweep
along an
it.
edge.
You could add points and you could add fillets along edges that are
Mm.
different from point to point.
If you could show us a that wasn't Connie, that was Cornelia. If you
That's
could show us a is it? Oh,
Yeah.
if you could show us a picture of that on Discord of the kind of thing you're looking for, I'll take a look into it. But I do want to mention something that's really funky. If you look at any Apple products, like the radius the radius of one of their phones, this is technically not a fillet. This is not a radius. They have different specifications. I think it's called like RC1-2-3, where it's different. It isn't a perfect circular or part of a circle. It's a different mathematical shape. It's technically a low slanting parabola. And it's, for whatever reason, it looks like a radius. For all intents and purposes, it is a fillet, but mathematically, technically, no, it isn't. Which is very, very weird. But apparently that shows up on all Apple products. Is what differentiates them for whatever reason. Silly. The other thing that I'm actually really interested in is the advancements of 3D printed food. So I think right now we have 3D printed chocolate that we saw open source, which is really groovy. We've had 3D printed cheese.
Pasta. Pasta's like the no-brainer. I mean, think about all the wacky things you can do with pasta. Right?
I mean, it's already like extruded and then cut.
Yeah.
So it is.
I haven't looked into it, but I'm certain there's some fascinating 3D printed pastas.
That'd be.
Yep, I've seen the 3D printed steak.
Mm-hmm. That's funny. That's what I want to talk about.
3D printed steak.
Yes. Okay. So, so Josh, you are a meat eater, and I've been vegan for over 6 years now. And when I started, Beyond Meats and Impossible Meat was kind of coming on the scene. But the whole idea is that it uses whey protein that you can find in plants. That's also what gives meat its unctuousness, and a bunch of really, really clever food scientists, pea protein, rice protein, etc., etc. But what they've kind of said right from the get-go is that it's fairly easy to make a processed meat, something that you'd use to make like meatballs or a hamburger or a doner kebab or a chicken nugget or anything like that, where it's essentially emascerated. But when you try and recreate the structures of a steak or a chicken breast, it gets really, really difficult because you've now literally got, I think they call it marbling, where it's literal structures of fats and tissue and ligaments all throughout this piece of meat. And that's really not something that you can get out of just kind of a uniform mass of a meat substitute. And so there are some companies that are trying to use FDM technology to try and embed these structures inside steaks.
Yep.
I've only ever seen one video on Instagram of this company making it, and the final product looks awful. Yeah. It looks terrible. Yeah. And and I don't know why, but the video that they published of them laying down, we have multiple it's a multiple material that's laying it down. It looks hideous. It looks awful. It's like the technology and the idea to do that is interesting, but the final product looks terrible. And unfortunately, there is zero chance that if it doesn't look accurate, there's zero chance you're going to convert any meat eaters into changing to a plant-based diet.
So I have a bit of a hot take on this one.
Hit me.
3D printing will not be used to make reproducible meats
I
in
agree.
that it will not be the primary structure creator. But where I
Mhm.
could see it being used is in mold making, where you need to make various shapes to lay down larger structures, right? And so you need some complexity in the way that, tissues grow, in the way that, right? So
Mhm.
my hot take is that lab grown will be the way that
Yeah.
we crack this one, but that lab grown may be assisted by 3D printing because
Mhm.
some of these structures, I don't think it's going to be as simple as just grow a hunk of meat
I
and let
want a
it
chicken breast.
expand.
Boom.
Right, right. So it's not going to be that simple. It's going to be more complex where you go,
Mhm.
well, we need to do this in a very specific order or else it doesn't connect and combine in the way that a normal piece of meat would. And so it's going to involve a pretty deep study of how these things are actually developed.
Mhm.
And then 3D printing will be adjacent to it, but I do not believe it will be the primary.
No, I think you're
and
exactly
al-
right.
and also, Thor says, right now I have spaghetti on my printer bed. OMG.
We will do.
Speaking of spaghetti, we're sorry, Thor. Yeah. Yes. I
Um,
Yeah, so you agree with that hot take then? Probably
I
not so
completely agree.
many extruded
I
meats. It also has a
Yeah.
weird, like, it kinda
Yeah.
gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about it,
In the
whereas
same way that, like, an extruded meat to make bologna gives me the heebie-jeebies, it's like,
well,
"Nah, nah,
yeah,
I'm fine. I'm alright."
yeah,
Um, but, what an application that I have seen for this, to bring it back to the whole future aspect, is that if we were to have year-long space travel that NASA has already started to do preparations for, where, "Oh, we need to go to Mars. It's going to take several years to get there." They're essentially just going to have a plant-based diet for it, because obviously you can't bring along an animal. The steak would go bad essentially. And so if you wanted to have multi-year, multi-decade, or multi-century space travel, you need to figure out how to get basically an accurate representation of this through a plant-based diet. And I think that'll bring it back into the next topic, which is space manufacturing. When we were at open source year one, there was a group of young college students that were making they were making essentially resin 3D printer for space, where the entire enclosed vat was resin, and they just had a probe that could move around within this fluid, and based on the very end of it, it had a UV LED essentially to kind of cure in that location. So it wasn't an X, Y, and Z Cartesian movement, but it was curing resin, and then you would take the resin part out of the fluid, wash it, rinse it, and then you got a final part. And they tested it on the vomit comets. So they tested it in 0G, which, by the way, that is absolutely very top of my bucket list. I want to do that so badly.
I agree. I do too.
If we can figure out some cool idea or something like for the business, I will happily, happily do something for
I
CADclass on the Vomit Comet.
Yes,
I want to
yes,
do that so badly. I don't know
yes,
what it would be, but I want to do it. I want to do some technology. I don't just want to bring our Saturn V rocket and throw it in the air and go, "Hey, it flies." I want
yeah,
to do something scientific with it.
yeah.
Um, but I this whole idea of manufacturing in space with 3D printing, it sounds great. Like, I think like 10 years ago, NASA sent up a file to an onboard 3D printer that made a wrench that had a 5 Newton meter limit, and it worked, but it's like you had to bring up all this filament, and you had to bring up all of this extra material that is just sitting there for most of the time, and then if it breaks, it's like, well, there's no trash can in space, you know? It just kind of has to live there. And so I've always been very, very, that's really cool, but I don't think it's likely gonna work. Space travel. What do you think?
I think it is actually well positioned to be a kind of a Swiss Army knife of
Yeah.
problem solvers
You can't
on
bring everything up there. Therefore, if you make something on board,
you can't
that's great. I'm
possibly
totally with that.
predict all of the things that will break and
Totally
that
agree.
you may need, and especially the little tools and specialty items. And so
Mhm.
I think for that reason, it has a place in space. I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean though. What when you say like I think it's got its place, but I don't know that it is a prominent place.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
It's kind of useful enough to do a couple of things. And it's
Mhm.
also interesting that it doesn't require you don't have to have gravity for it to work. That's kind of neat,
Yeah.
right?
We
This
saw open source people are printing upside down.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
rad.
So useful for mainly minor things.
Yeah.
Maybe occasionally, a hard to reach spot with a tool you couldn't have predicted that you needed. It's great for
Mm,
making tools. It's great for making jigs. If
mhm,
you're working in a lab on in there and you needed something specialty, I could see that being useful as well. But
mhm.
yeah, I'm not sure it has too much application outside of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um,
Really
self-healing.
quickly, really quickly,
Oh,
we have Connie with the
oh,
Discord general discussion. Now
oh.
we see a picture of the asymmetric fillet that she
Thank you,
wants.
thank you, thank you. Let's show it off. Let's see what we can do. Ooh. So that is so this technically isn't a fillet, this is a spline. Because this edge has to be tangent to that edge, this edge has to be tangent to that edge. Interesting. Ooh, okay. Let's see, because that's actually got me kind of interested. Let's just make a very simple little L-shaped bracket. Sorry, my mouse clicks are very slow. I've got a brand new mouse that I'm still learning how to move quickly in CAD. Okay, so very, very simple fillets. You can click on any edges, and then you can apply a symmetric fillet. One of the things that we were talking about earlier is the radius type. This is set to constant. So the idea is that it's an equal radius all the way through, but you can set that to be a variable where you can pull in one side more than the other, so you can see the slants. You can also do cordial, where it's changing. Well, if you can see it on the edge, it is still symmetric, but you're essentially changing the sharpness at that point. This is a parabolic curve. So I think so I think Connie's kind of asking for a chordal change biaxially, which
Yes.
doesn't look like is available. But I do want to play around. Yeah, between two edges. Yep,
So
there.
Derry said, "Can you chamfer and then fillet the two lines individually?" That's maybe an interesting approach.
Let's try that.
Yeah, I like
God,
that
our
idea.
community is so smart. Can I just
Yeah, yeah, it looks like and look,
show
he's
off just how clever
so
you guys are?
so Derry just did it, and it looks pretty good, actually. I don't know if
So
it's
let's
exactly
say that
what's needed.
to 8. You would kind of need to know. Is that perfect, or is that? Oh, if I change this to something like 4, so it really showcases off. Oops. If I can get ever closer to it, I think the whole point is that you need to get essentially as close to that as possible. Yeah, that's kind of working. So these two arcs are essentially technically uh tangents to each other. It doesn't look great. So the other way that I would probably do it is splinally, if that's a word. It's not. Where you essentially use this to make a profile. where we can kind of mess around with the curves a little bit, mess around with the vertices that can become tangent to these walls. Yeah, I'll mess around with all this later. Boom, move that one up. And essentially move all these around until we have it doesn't pass below. There we go. And then use this as a sweep. This is a straight line, so you could just extrude it, but I'm kind of imagining that you may have some weird curves in the future. But I think this is technically the cleaner way to do it. Does that look about right, Josh?
It looks about right, yeah. I'm not sure you're going to be able to do it mathematically driven, Connie. I can't think of a way outside of the two approaches we've just had that, especially if like it needs to be. I'm guessing that it needs to be variable, consistently variable from 20 to 40, or maybe not. That's a question for you, Connie. Does it need to be consistently variable along that path where it's increasing linearly as you go, or decreasing?
Because the actual architecture of the curve is obviously changeable, and in the SolidWorks there is no like yes, technically this works, but there is that, as you can see, variability into it. And this angle, as long as the spline doesn't pass below the bottom line, is kind of up to you of how steep or how sharp that curvature is. That's a funky one. That's really, really interesting. I think that's as close as we can get in Fusion. There's not many cases where that is needed. So, Connie, if you could tell us, that'd be really, really interesting to know about what in your project requires biaxial fillets. That's gonna be really interesting. All right.
Good stuff.
Self-healing printable parts. This is something that has been really, really interesting to think about this morning. The idea is that with a 3D printed part, you get a cut in a surface or a maybe not removed material, but a surface or structural breakage that can then heal itself. So just to, as a starting point, we do have self-healing structures. We've had it for thousands of years. For people who don't know the history of material sciences, it's a really funky, weird part of human history where we just forget technology and then we have to reinvent it. And that time span that we forgot can be thousands of years. And it's just bizarre. One of the famous examples is concrete. The Romans had concrete. And then during the fall of the Roman Empire, because of many different factors, humanity forgot how to make concrete. And it was only rediscovered in like the 1800s. It was just bizarre. Really, really, really strange. And people have often asked, hey, how come the concrete structures of today crack and crumble? They need to be replaced every few decades. Whereas, we've had like the Parthenon and all of these beautiful Roman structures for, 2,000 years plus, and they still look great. And it was a mystery for decades and decades and decades. And we finally figured it out is that the water and material that the Romans used was salt water, and it had a lye compound in it. And so when you formed cracks, rainwater would seep into it, mix with the lime, and then create a essentially composite material that is stronger than the surrounding concrete itself. So everywhere there was a crack became even stronger. And obviously things crack over time. And it just became stronger and stronger and stronger. But the water that they used from the Mediterranean Sea had this very specific compound. And it really only existed in the area around Italy. So it was like, oh, fantastic. And so this idea of self-healing materials coming to a 3D printing material is absolutely fantastic. I think that's likely going to happen. Maybe even a structural crack within a surface. As soon as it's cracked and it's then got new exposed surfaces that then can be fit back into place and then self-healed and self-glued back together.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to I was trying to imagine like what how that would work or why, and also thinking about the strengths and weaknesses of 3D printing. And one of the strengths is obviously how quickly you can prototype and iterate, and also replace broken things.
Mhm,
So it seems there's less of an incentive to create self-healing 3D printed structures simply because you can just make more.
mhm.
But wow, I don't feel I have a strong.
I think that's just around the corner. I think that's a
You think so?
material science thing. Yeah, I do.
It's
I think
possible it
especially
already
on
exists. It's possible it already exists.
I mean, hell, we've made 10 billion end grain cutting boards. And the one of the niceties with it, that's when all the fibers are pointing upwards. And as soon as you cut with a knife and you pull it away, all the fibers are essentially just moved out of the way. And then over time, with moisture from the air, it self heals. And so all these cuts you have in a surface, then it looks lovely and clean again. So we kind of have it. I'm just waiting for it to come to 3D printing. I think
Yeah.
it's gonna look great.
I mean, I think
Um,
it's yeah, it's rad.
I think that is gonna happen. The other thing that ChatGPT came up with that I've never heard of, that I was kind of sitting there going, "Damn, that's really cool," is 4D printing. The idea that you make a structure that changes over time. They said with the presence of heat, moisture, or light, structure is able to move in certain helpful ways. I think that's I
Ooh.
know. I was like, "Whoa, that's kind of rad." Because we do have materials called dichromatic or UV chromatic, where if you put it into sunlight, it can go from white to pink or green to blue, which I haven't printed with because there's not really many circumstances. Or if you print a computer case in certain materials called thermocratic, where the areas that are heated up more change colors. So you can see where the CPU is and where other electronic components that generate heat, you can see where they are because it's literally changing the color. And I'm like, that's always been cool with very, very few applications. But actually changing size, it just sounds rad. That sounds really, really, really interesting.
I
Like,
it makes me think too, I bet we'll see that in art exhibits before we see it
yes.
anywhere else.
Well,
That would
yeah.
be a really rad, like, temperature, UV rays, humidity.
Mhm. I mean, there's already this kind of tech with greenhouses where there's, bimetallic coils where as soon as the inside heats up too much, it automatically lifts up a vent hood and so the heat can get left down and then it cools down, it naturally closes. So I'm thinking something along those lines. A bi-material 3D printing expanding structure. Just
Ooh.
sounds so flipping cool.
So, I like the framing of it too. Like,
Yeah.
the framing of it where it changes in a way that does something useful or interesting.
Mhm.
Very, very cool. I
That's
would
pretty rad.
say that's almost like this idea of like print in place, right? So
Mhm.
print in place is a new manufacturing idea
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
I don't believe existed with injection molding, or if it did, I wasn't aware of it, right? Because it just takes the unique way in which these structures are built and
Mhm.
uses that as an advantage. So yeah, I like that a lot. Interesting.
Very cool. The other one was personalized prosthetics, which technically do exist, and
Yes.
I actually want to talk about this a little bit more because it's something that I've seen, and I'm always like uh, a little bit grossed out by from like a humanitarian perspective. So there are companies in the US that where if you have a dog, for example, with a missing leg, they can take a 3D scanner, scan what's remaining of their arm or their leg, and then essentially being able to 3D print a custom buck that fits over, what's left of the poor creature, and then essentially merge it with a pre-existing 3D printed prosthetic where the majority of the leg has already been made. They're just working on a custom piece that interfaces between the animal and the leg. So they can mass produce the leg, and they're just using the 3D printing and 3D scanning as the interface. That's awesome. That's super cool. I can't remember which YouTuber interviewed them, but I'm like, that's so awesome. That's such an amazing application of it. And at the same time, we've also seen in the 3D printing world these charity events where people will 3D print perfectly open source files for prosthetics for humans, mainly children, who've unfortunately been born in countries that have been littered with landmines that are forgotten after wars and are always just destroying the lives of children who are just playing in an open field and then their life changed forever. And it is always or it is never custom fit. It's always the sizes are always proportional to them as they at their age, which is amazing, and they can do all these colors and get the child actually excited again. But I've never seen any 3D scanning in these poorer countries for the interface of 3D printing to a human. I've never.
I do think they have it. I think what we should do is our hour's up. But what I would be curious to do is you and I, and maybe some of the people that listen to this in the audience, look up some of the ideas we just talked about. Let's find out what already exists in these worlds and see what we both know and don't know. And then pick this discussion back up next week and go, oh, okay, I didn't know they existed in these ways. And so let's take a little bit of a deeper dive and find out where we actually stand. Because this was just us thinking off the cuff where we think we might stand. But you and I both know how fast technology moves. So
Yeah.
chances are pretty good. I think I'm going to be surprised.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Yeah. So next week, to be continued.
All right, guys. I think that's going to be it for this week.
Yeah, this is the pod. This has been the CADclass podcast. Once again, I'm Josh.
I'm Jake.
I will see you all next week.
Adios.